Before heroes were symbols, before monsters became metaphors, there was a time when the world felt closer to the gods. This is the story of Perseus, not yet a legend, not yet a hero, but a young man caught between fate, fear, and the impossible expectations placed upon him. As you listen, imagine a world shaped by prophecy, ruled by pride, and haunted by creatures born of the divine. Settle in, and let the story unfold. In the ancient land of Argos, where the hills sloped gently towards the Aegean, and the air shimmered with the heat of 1,000 suns, there lived a king named Perseus, a ruler of stern heart and heavy brow. Though his wealth was vast and his lineage noble, his spirit was troubled, for the gods had denied him a son to carry his name. Only one child had been born to him, Danae, a daughter radiant as dawn, whose hair glowed like threads of gold, and whose eyes caught the light like the sea. Despite her beauty and grace, Danae could not soothe her father's bitterness, for Perseus feared that when he died, his throne would be left to another man, a stranger not of his blood. So he turned to the oracle of Delphi, hoping for comfort or guidance, yet what he received was terror instead. From the shadowed chamber of the oracle, the priestess spoke with the voice of Apollo himself. "You shall have no son, Perseus, and your daughter's son shall be the death of you." The words struck him like a hammer blow. In that moment, all warmth drained from his heart, replaced by cold dread. The gods, he thought, had cursed him, and so, desperate to thwart fate, he resolved to prevent the prophecy's fulfillment by any means. Perseus returned to Argos with a dark purpose. Deep beneath his palace, he ordered a bronze chamber to be forged, its walls thick and seamless, its ceiling sealed so that no light, no whisper of the outside world could enter. There, he imprisoned Danae, believing that if no man could see her, she could bear no child. Years passed, and the maiden lived in her gleaming cage. Her only companions the echo of her voice and the dim reflections of her beauty on the polished walls. But the gods are not mocked by mortal schemes, and destiny does not yield to iron or fear. For far above the mortal realm, Zeus, the king of the gods, looked down upon Argos and beheld Danae's loneliness. Her sorrow touched him. Her spirit, pure and untamed, shone through even the bronze prison her father had built. Desire stirred within him, but more than that, a divine compassion. So Zeus, in his infinite cunning, took form not as a man or beast, but as a shower of golden light that fell softly through the narrow grate of her cell. The light sparkled across her skin, warm and tender. From that union, mortal and divine, was born Perseus, a child of two worlds, a son of a mortal woman, and the lord of Olympus himself. When Perseus discovered the infant, he trembled with rage and terror. His daughter wept, begging her father for mercy, swearing that no mortal man had touched her, that the child was a gift of the heavens. But Perseus was deaf to her pleas. In his mind, the prophecy already stirred, the words of the oracle ringing like a death knell. He dared not slay them outright, for to kill the offspring of Zeus was to invite divine vengeance. Yet he thought he could cheat fate by casting mother and child into the sea, leaving their survival to the will of Poseidon. One moonless night, Perseus ordered his guards to take Danae and her infant son to the shore. There, under a sky heavy with stars, they placed them inside a wooden chest, sturdy but without oar or sail, and set it adrift upon the waves. Danae clutched her baby close, whispering prayers to the gods for mercy as the salt spray stung her face. The chest rocked and spun, the wind howling like some monstrous beast, yet she never released her child. The sea was vast and merciless. For days and nights uncounted, the chest drifted. Danae sang lullabies to Perseus to keep herself from despair. She thought of her father, of Argos, of the prophecy that had cursed their bloodline. Yet in her heart there remained a fragile flame of hope, born of the belief that if the gods had chosen to give her a divine child, they would not abandon him so easily. And indeed, Zeus watched. Though the sea raged, no wave dared swallow the chest. Though the winds howled, none could overturn it. At last, the tides carried Danae and her son to the island of Seriphos, a rocky land ruled by King Polydectes. At dawn, a fisherman named Dictys, brother to the king, was walking along the shore when he saw a strange chest washed up among the reeds. He broke it open and found, to his astonishment, a beautiful woman and a small child inside, both alive, though weary and pale. Dictys took them into his home, offering food, shelter, and kindness without question. Over the years, he grew to love Perseus as his own son. The boy thrived under his care, his strength and wit growing with each passing year. His mother, Danae, never ceased to thank the gods for their deliverance. Though in her dream she still saw the bronze walls of her prison and heard the whisper of the prophecy that had changed her life. Perseus grew into a youth of striking presence, his hair dark as obsidian, his eyes bright with intelligence and courage. He learned the ways of the sea and the sword, taught by Dictys, and often stood by his mother when she gazed out across the waves, wondering if the land of her birth still remembered her. But peace is fragile in the lives of mortals touched by gods, for though Dictys was good and kind, his brother Polydectes was not. The king of Seriphos was a man of greed and vanity, who desired beauty and power above all else. When he first beheld Danae, her golden hair gleaming even after years of hardship, he was captivated, yet she, faithful to her memory of Zeus and devoted to her son, rejected his advances. At first Polydectes concealed his anger beneath a mask of civility, but as Perseus grew older and stronger, the king's jealousy deepened. He feared the young man who protected his mother with unwavering devotion. Danae's beauty, once a delight to his eyes, became a source of bitterness, but she remained forever beyond his reach. And so Polydectes devised a plan, one that would rid him of Perseus without staining his hands in blood. Years passed upon the island of Seriphos, and Perseus grew into manhood. The people of the island spoke of him with admiration. The youth who laboured beside fishermen, who trained with a sword though no war threatened, who carried himself not as a humble islander, but with the quiet grace of one born to something greater. Yet where the people saw promise, King Polydectes saw a threat. The boy had become a man, tall, strong, and noble. He spoke his mind with a fearless honesty, and guarded his mother with a devotion that mocked the king's unspoken desire. Danae's refusal, once merely an irritation, had now become a source of humiliation. Polydectes bided his time, but hatred festers in silence. At last, he summoned his court and declared he would take a wife. "It is time," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "that Seriphos be ruled by both king and queen. I have chosen the maiden Hippodamia, famed across the island for her beauty. In her honour, I shall hold a grand feast." Messengers spread the word. The people rejoiced, for they thought their king finally tamed by love. Guests were commanded to bring gifts, costly offerings befitting of a royal marriage. Perseus, who had no gold nor treasure, felt shame twist in his chest. "My lord," he said earnestly before the gathered court, "I have nothing of worth to offer, but name any prize you wish, and if it lies within the power of mortal hands to bring it, I will fetch it for you." The words fell like bait upon the king's ears. He smiled thinly. "A bold promise, son of Danae. Very well, if you speak true, bring me the head of Medusa, the Gorgon, and lay it at my feet." Gasps rippled through the hall. All knew the name of Medusa, one of 3 monstrous sisters who dwelled in darkness at the edge of the world. Her face, it was said, was so terrible that no man could look upon it and live. With serpents for hair and eyes that turned flesh to stone, she was a terror whispered to children in the night. Perseus did not flinch, though he did not know if the king spoke in jest or malice. He bowed low. "It shall be done, my lord." And so the trap was sprung. When the feast ended, Danae fell to her knees before her son, tears streaking her cheeks. "You cannot go," she begged. "No mortal has faced the Gorgon and returned. You owe Polydectes nothing. He seeks only to destroy you." But Perseus gently lifted her to her feet. "Mother, I cannot live in shame. The word of a man must mean something, even before a false king. If the gods favour me, I will return. He embraced her and took leave of Dictys, the fisherman who had raised him as his own. Then he set out alone into the wilderness, guided only by the distant murmur of the sea and the whisper of fate that had shadowed him since birth. For many days Perseus wandered, seeking some clue that might lead him to the Gorgon's lair. His heart burned with determination, but the world seemed vast and indifferent. Hunger gnawed at him, and despair crept close. It was then, as he sat beside a stream at dusk, that a sudden shimmer split the air. From the light stepped Hermes, the fleet messenger of Olympus, his cloak shining like quicksilver, his winged sandals glinting in the dying sun. Beside him stood Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, her armour gleaming like the moonlit sea, her gaze both stern and kind. "Perseus," Hermes said with a smile, "son of Zeus, the gods have not forgotten you." Perseus fell to one knee. "Lord Hermes, Lady Athena, if truly I am the son of Zeus, then aid me, for I am set upon an impossible task." Athena's voice was calm and melodic. "Your courage is pleasing to Olympus. You seek the head of Medusa, but you cannot face her as you are. Even the bravest warrior would perish beneath her gaze. You must learn cunning as well as valour." Hermes drew from his side a blade of exquisite craftsmanship, the sickle of adamant, forged by Hephaestus himself. "Take this," he said. "It will cut through stone and scale alike." Athena then held out a polished bronze shield, its surface mirrored to perfection. "And this shall be your sight. Do not gaze upon Medusa directly. Look only upon her reflection, and her power shall be her undoing." Perseus took the gifts with reverence, feeling a divine fire kindle in his heart. Yet Athena was not finished. "You must also seek the Graiai, the sisters of the Gorgons, old as time itself, but with one eye and one tooth between them. They alone know the way to the realm of Medusa. But be wary, they serve darkness and deceit." Hermes added with a grin, "And when you find them, remember, cleverness will win where strength cannot." With that, the gods vanished, leaving only a faint scent of olive and air like lightning in their wake. Perseus rose, his resolve renewed. The world no longer seemed so vast, destiny itself now beckoned him forward. He journeyed far beyond the lands known to men, across deserts where the sun burned the ground to glass, and through forests where no birds sang. At last, in a grey valley perpetually shrouded in mist, he found the cave of the Graiai. They were dreadful to behold. 3 ancient crones with skin as pale as wax, their hair thin and colourless. Their forms twisted and hunched. They shared between them one single eye and one tooth, passing each from sister to sister in turn. They muttered ceaselessly. Perseus hid in the shadows, watching. When one sister removed the eye to hand it to another, he darted forward and snatched it from her grasp. The crones shrieked in unison, clawing at the air. "Thief! Thief of sight! Return what is ours!" "Not until you tell me what I seek," Perseus said firmly. "Show me the way to the nymphs who guard the treasures of the gods. The cap of invisibility, the winged sandals, and the pouch that can hold anything." The Graiai hissed, their teeth clicking between them. "Why should we help you, mortal? Medusa's curse is eternal." "Because," Perseus replied, "if you do not, I will cast your eye into the sea, and you shall be blind forever." The 3 wailed and twisted, their spindly fingers trembling. At last one croaked, "Very well, go north beyond the land of night. There beyond the edge of the world, you will find the nymphs of the west. They guard what you seek." Satisfied, Perseus returned the eye, though not before whispering, "Remember me, sisters, for even in darkness, the truth can see." Then he departed, his heart racing with triumph. The Graiai's directions led him to a hidden glade, where 3 radiant nymphs awaited him, their laughter soft as wind through reeds. They greeted him as one known to them by fate, for they too were bound to the will of Olympus. To Perseus, they gave 3 sacred gifts: the helm of Hades, which granted invisibility, a pouch woven by the gods, able to contain even a monster's head, and the winged sandals of Hermes, light as air and faster than thought. "Go now," son of Zeus, they said. Your destiny awaits beyond the black waters, where the Gorgons sleep. Perseus bowed deeply. May the gods remember your kindness. As he strapped the sandals to his feet, the earth fell away beneath him. The wind carried him high above the clouds. The world spread beneath him like a vast tapestry. The air tasted of salt and storm, and ahead, far beyond the horizon, loomed the land of eternal night, the dwelling of monsters and gods forgotten. His task was set, his courage burned bright, and though fear stirred faintly in his heart, it was tempered by a deeper flame, the unyielding will to face what no man had ever faced before. Thus began the true journey of Perseus, the mortal born of God's light, armed with the gifts of Olympus and the knowledge that only by embracing his fate could he one day master it. Perseus soared upon the wind. The winged sandals borne from the hands of the divine nymphs carried him swiftly over seas and mountains, through storms that lashed the heavens and clouds that shone like silver beneath the sun. He was no longer a boy of Seriphos. He was a figure of myth in motion, a gleam of bronze and courage against the endless blue. Below him stretched the lands of men, but ahead lay something far beyond mortal comprehension, the edge of the world, where night and day met in silence. It was said no traveller had ever returned from that desolate realm, where the Gorgons slept and the earth itself wept black blood into the sea. Perseus' heart was steady. The voices of Hermes and Athena lingered in his mind, guides that spoke not in words, but in the language of purpose. He gripped his adamantine sickle, the blade forged by Hephaestus, and checked the polished shield that hung from his arm. His other divine gifts, the helm of Hades and the pouch of the gods, waited for their moment of need. At last, after many days, the skies grew darker. The light around him faded to twilight, though the sun still burned somewhere beyond the veil. He crossed over a barren plain of black stone where the air reeked of sulphur and decay. No sound of life stirred. The world here was empty, save for the whisper of the wind that carried the echo of old horrors. It was there that Perseus saw them, the Gorgons, sleeping among the ruins of what had once been a temple, perhaps to some forgotten god. 3 there were, Stheno, Uriel, and Medusa. The first 2 were immortal, their monstrous beauty unbroken by time, their bodies plated in scales that shimmered faintly even in the gloom. But it was Medusa, the mortal sister, who drew his eye, and his fear. Her form was both terrible and pitiful. Once, long ago, she had been a maiden of surpassing beauty, devoted to Athena's temple, but pride had been her undoing. Some say she had compared her beauty to the goddess's own. Others whisper that Poseidon, lord of the sea, defiled her upon the sacred altar, and Athena, wrathful at the desecration, cursed her. Whatever the truth, her face had become a thing of horror, her hair a living nest of serpents that hissed and writhed even as she slept. Her breath stirred the air like a whisper from the grave. Around her lay countless statues, men, beasts, even birds, frozen in the instant they had met her gaze. Their faces were locked in silent terror, their forms glinting like marble under a pale, ghostly light. Perseus hovered above the ground, hidden by the helm of Hades. His steps made no sound, even the snakes could not sense him, yet still he trembled, for he knew that a single mistake would mean not death, but eternal stillness. He lifted Athena's mirror-bright shield before him. In its surface, Medusa's reflection shimmered faintly, a distorted flickering vision, yet enough to guide his hand. Each step was agony. His breath came slow and shallow. He dared not look directly, dared not blink too long. He crept closer, closer, until he could hear the faint rustle of scales, the sigh of her unnatural sleep. Then, as the air grew still, he raised the sickle of adamant. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. The woman before him, monster though she was, had once been mortal. Her curse was not born of evil, but of divine cruelty. Was this justice, or vengeance masquerading as valor? But the thought passed. The gods had set this task upon him, and he was the instrument of fate. With one swift motion, faster than the hiss of her serpents, he struck. The blade sang through the air, slicing cleanly. A burst of black ichor sprayed across the stone, sizzling where it fell. Medusa's body convulsed once, and was still. From her severed neck sprang forth two beings of wonder, the winged host Perseus, pure as moonlight, and the giant Chrysaor, a warrior born full-grown and golden-armed. They leaped into the air, both of death and divinity, symbols of beauty wrested from horror. Pegasus, his mane flowing like liquid silver, circled once above Perseus, as though in acknowledgement. Then he spread his wings and soared into the clouds, free and untamed, carrying with him the breath of the storm. Perseus, his heart hammering, quickly placed the Gorgon's head into the divine pouch, its serpent still twitching and writhing even in death. The world seemed to shudder, the darkness deepened, the earth groaned beneath his feet. The other Gorgons had awakened. Stheno and Uriel rose with screams that shook the stones. Their wings, vast and leathery, beat the air like thunder. Their eyes blazed with fury, searching the shadows. "Medusa!" they cried. "Sister, who has done this?" Perseus leapt into the air, unseen beneath the helm's magic. The air trembled with the wrath of immortals. They clawed at the sky, their talons rending clouds, their cries echoing across the desolation. Stones shattered where their gazes fell, and the ground split like dry clay. Invisible, Perseus sped away, the winged sandals carrying him swift as thought. The screams of the Gorgons followed him, a chorus of hatred that could have shattered the heart of any mortal man. But Perseus did not falter. He had faced the unfaceable. He had done what no man dared. He flew across lands both strange and wondrous, mountains that glowed faintly with trapped fire, rivers of mist that whispered secrets to the wind. The world below him seemed to shift and twist, as though the boundaries between dream and reality had blurred. At last, after what seemed both an eternity and a moment, he emerged from the shadowed lands into the brilliance of dawn. The sunlight struck his armour, and he felt warmth again for the first time in days. Yet even in triumph there was no peace. The image of Medusa's lifeless face haunted him, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how thin the line was between curse and destiny. He landed upon a high cliff overlooking a vast sea. The wind carried the scent of salt and wildflowers. There, he removed the helm, feeling its weight vanish from his spirit. He knelt and washed his blade in the surf, watching the dark ichor dissolve into the waves like ink in water. Then he opened the pouch and gazed upon the head. The serpents writhed weakly, as if aware of their new imprisonment. Their eyes were closed, yet even through the lids a faint glow pulsed, dangerous, forbidden, divine. Athena's voice echoed in his mind. "Use her power wisely, son of Zeus. Her death is not the end of your trial, it is the beginning." Perseus bowed his head. "Then guide me, goddess. Let my path be one of honor." As he spoke, a sudden shadow fell across the sea. Far in the distance, he saw storm clouds gathering, and within them, a shape vast and terrible. A beast bound in chains of lightning, but he did not yet know what awaited him there. He fastened the pouch to his side, the head secured within, and took to the air once more. The sandals bore him onward, and the cries of the Gorgons faded into silence behind him. For many leagues he flew over the lands unknown to men. He saw islands like jewels scattered across the ocean, and deserts where the sands shimmered like molten gold. He passed tribes that knelt to strange gods, and mountains where the peaks tore holes in the sky. Everywhere, the wind whispered his name, though none yet knew it. At night, he would rest upon lonely shores, gazing at the stars. Sometimes, when the moon rose, he thought he could see the faint outline of Pegasus soaring across the heavens, wild, free, and untamed. It filled him with both pride and melancholy, for the creature's beauty had been born from a moment of blood and sorrow. He came at last to the edge of Ethiopia, a land ruled by King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. But the gods are jealous of mortal pride, and their wrath had fallen upon this kingdom. For Cassiopeia, in her vanity, had once boasted that her beauty surpassed even that of the Nereids, daughters of the sea god Poseidon. Enraged by her arrogance, the Nereids had begged their father for vengeance, and Poseidon had answered with a fury. He had sent forth a monster, A vast sea serpent, scales glistening like obsidian, eyes glowing with the light of drowned souls, to ravage the coast and devour all who defied it. When Perseus arrived, he found the kingdom on its knees, trembling beneath the weight of divine punishment. The people cried out for deliverance, but their prayers went unanswered. Yet fate had brought Perseus there for a reason. As he flew above the coastline, the winds whipped his cloak. He saw something that made his heart seize. A maiden bound to a rock at the edge of the sea, her arms chained, her body trembling. She was clothed only in rags of ceremony, her face pale as moonlight, yet radiant with courage. Her name was Andromeda, and her story would forever intertwine with his. Perseus descended silently, the air trembling as he landed on the stones. For a moment, he thought her a statue carved by some cruel god. Her beauty was so unearthly, her stillness so profound. But then she stirred, lifting her head weakly, and her eyes, wide and luminous, met his. "You are no dream," she whispered, her voice trembling like a reed in the wind. "No dream," Perseus answered softly. "Tell me your name, and who has done this to you?" She looked toward the horizon, where the sea churned as though something vast moved beneath it. "I am Andromeda," she said, "daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. My mother boasted that my beauty surpassed that of the Nereids, the daughters of the sea. In her pride, she angered Poseidon, and he sent a monster, a serpent from the deep, to punish our land. The oracle declared that only my sacrifice could appease him." Her voice faltered, but she stood tall despite her chains. "So here I wait, bound to this rock, to die for my mother's vanity." Perseus' heart stirred with fury and compassion. The gods were swift to anger, he knew, and mortals were ever their playthings. But this was no just punishment. This was cruelty. He stepped closer, the dawn light glinting on the bronze of his armor and the silver sheen of the Gorgon's head within its pouch. "I have slain monsters before," he said quietly, "and I will slay this one too." Andromeda turned to him, disbelief flickering through her eyes. "You would fight it? For me? A stranger?" Perseus smiled faintly. "Not for you alone, daughter of Cepheus. For justice. For defiance against the god's whim." The sea began to roar. From the depths, a tremor rolled through the earth, shaking the stones beneath their feet. And then, through the froth and foam, it rose. Cetus, the sea monster of Poseidon, vast as a mountain and terrible as the storm. Its body was scaled and glistening, its jaws wide enough to swallow ships whole. The air stank of salt and rot. Its bellow rolled across the cliffs like thunder. Perseus leapt into the sky, the sandals bearing him upward. He drew his curved blade, the sickle of adamant that had beheaded the Gorgon, and shouted a challenge that rang above the crashing waves. The monster turned its gaze toward him, and the sea boiled as it lunged. Perseus darted aside, swift as a falcon, and the creature's massive tail shattered the rock where Andromeda had been bound. Water surged around her legs, and she cried out as the chains tore against her wrists. He circled the beast, striking from the air, slashing at its eyes, its fins, its thrashing coils. Blood, dark and smoking, spilled into the water, staining it crimson. But Cetus was ancient and strong, and no single wound could fell it. Each time Perseus struck, the monster roared louder, sending waves that nearly cast him from the sky. He reached for the pouch at his side. His hand hesitated. The Gorgon's head was a weapon beyond mortal right, a thing of gods and curses. But the cries of Andromeda and the thunder of the monster's rage drove away all doubt. He turned the pouch outward. The head of Medusa emerged, terrible and radiant, the serpents writhing in silent fury. Even in death, her power was undiminished. When Cetus saw her face, the sea monster screamed, a sound so vast it seemed to split the sky, and in an instant, its foam stiffened, its coils froze mid-lash, its jaws locked wide. Salt spray turned to dust. The creature solidified, its body hardened into stone, until it stood half-risen from the sea like a dark island of rock. The waves fell silent. The air was still. Perseus turned away from the petrified beast and descended to the shore. He sheathed his blade and approached Andromeda, whose chains had been shattered by the monster's thrashing. She sank to her knees, the surf lapping at her feet, her eyes wide with awe and disbelief. "You are free," Perseus said softly, breaking the last of her bonds. "The gods demanded your death, but I have given you back to life." She gazed up at him, her face pale and luminous against the dawn. "You came from the sky," she whispered, touching his arm as if to be sure he was real. "Like the messengers of Olympus." "I am only a man," Perseus replied, though part of him wondered if it were true. "But I have the favour of the gods." Together, they walked from the water's edge, and the people of Ethiopia, who had gathered on the cliffs to watch the sacrifice, fell to their knees as they saw her saved and the sea made calm. King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia descended in tears and wonder, their crowns trembling in their hands. Cepheus fell before Perseus, calling him saviour of his land, and offered him anything he desired. Perseus looked to Andromeda, her eyes shining, her hair glistening with salt and sunlight, and spoke quietly. "I desire only her." Cassiopeia, pride tempered by grief and awe, bowed her head. "Then she shall be yours, hero of Argos." Andromeda's lips parted, her breath catching in her throat. "Do you mean it?" she whispered. Perseus smiled. "I have looked upon the Gorgon's face and lived. I have flown through the storm and the darkness, but never have I seen anything so radiant as you. If you will have me, I will stay." The sea breeze stirred around them as she reached for his hand. "Then I will have you," she said, and for the first time, her voice held peace. That night, beneath a sky strewn with stars, the people of Ethiopia held a feast in their honour. Fires burned along the shore, and songs rose to the heavens. Perseus and Andromeda sat beside one another, silent amid the celebration, each feeling the strange pull of destiny between them, for she had been born to the sea, and he to the sky, and in their union, earth and heaven met. But even as they smiled, Perseus knew his journey was not yet done. The head of Medusa still lay in his satchel, a weight and a warning. Somewhere across the waters, his mother still lived under threat, and his fate still circled, waiting to strike. Yet for this single night, he allowed himself peace. The peace of victory, of love born from peril, of beauty wrested from the jaws of death. And far above them, unseen but not unmoved, the gods watched in silence. Zeus smiled faintly at the courage of his son. Athena's eyes gleamed with pride, and Poseidon, though still angered by Cassiopeia's vanity, turned the sea gentle once more. The dawn after the feast rose golden and calm. On the shores of Ethiopia, the tide whispered softly against the rocks where, only a day before, a maiden had been bound to die. Now the sea was tranquil, and the people sang hymns to Perseus and Andromeda, to Zeus and Athena, to Poseidon himself, though the sea god's name was spoken with a careful reverence. Perseus stood at the water's edge, his cloak stirring in the breeze. Beside him stood Andromeda, crowned with garlands of white flowers, her gaze lifted toward the horizon. "You will go," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes." Perseus took her hand. "I must. My mother waits for me on Seriphos, and I know Polydectes' heart. It is cruel and restless. I fear what he might have done in my absence." Andromeda looked at him, sorrow mingled with understanding. "Then go, but promise me you will return." He smiled, brushing her hair from her face. "I swear it, by the gods above and the sea that bore us both." And with that, he called upon Hermes' sandals once more. The air shimmered as he rose to the sky, the light of the morning glinting off the bronze of his sword and shield. Below him, Andromeda's figure grew smaller, her white garments billowing like wings. The flight back to Seriphos was long and silent. Beneath him, Perseus saw the islands drift by, emeralds set in the endless blue. The sun climbed high, and by the time it sank, the familiar cliffs of Seriphos rose from the sea. But as he neared the shore, something felt wrong. The once peaceful island seemed subdued, its harbour quiet, its people scarce in the streets. He landed lightly near the home of Dictys, the fisherman who had raised him. The old man ran to meet him, tears bright in his eyes. "Perseus!" he cried, By all the gods, you live! Perseus clasped his arms. I live, and I have done all that was asked of me. But what has happened here? Where is my mother? Dicte's face darkened. Polydectes. He would not give her peace. He pressed her again to marry him, and when she refused, he cast her into the temple of Hera, claiming sanctuary as imprisonment. She prays there still, guarded day and night. Perseus' jaw hardened. Then my errand is not yet complete. He strode toward the palace, his footsteps echoing on the marble steps. The guards who saw him drew back in awe, for though years had passed, his bearing was no longer that of a fisherman's son. He moved with the quiet command of one who had stood before gods and monsters. Within the hall, Polydectes sat upon his throne, surrounded by courtiers. He looked up as Perseus entered, his lips curling in mock surprise. "So," said the king, his voice dripping with false courtesy, "the boy returns. Tell me, Perseus, where is your great trophy? Did you find your Gorgon, or have you come back to beg for forgiveness for your failure?" The courtiers laughed softly, though uneasily. There was something in Perseus' eyes that silenced even mockery. "I found her," Perseus said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I found Medusa, and I bring her gift to you." He reached into the satchel at his side. Polydectes sneered. "You think to frighten me with words? Show me then, if you speak truth." Perseus drew forth the head of Medusa. Even lifeless, her face held a terrible beauty. Her lips parted as if in a final breath. The serpents in her hair hissed faintly, caught between life and death. "Then look upon her," Perseus said. Polydectes did, and in that instant, his expression froze. The sneer remained on his lips, but his eyes turned to stone. His courtiers gasped and tried to flee, but the curse was swift as lightning. Where laughter had been, there was silence. The entire hall became a gallery of statues, faces locked forever in sheer shock and horror. Only Perseus remained standing, the weight of his vengeance heavy in his hand. He lowered the Gorgon's head, covering it once more in its cloth, and turned away. He walked through the palace and out into the open air, the sea wind striking his face. He felt no triumph, only justice. He found Danae at the temple of Hera, still kneeling before the altar. When she looked up and saw her son, she cried out and ran to him, her arms trembling as she embraced him. "My son," she whispered, "my brave, blessed son. I prayed every day that the gods would keep you." Perseus smiled and pressed his forehead to hers. "They did, mother, and they kept you as well." He led her back through the streets, the people gathering in awe as word spread. The tyrant was gone. Perseus declared Dictys king in his brother's place, for the old fisherman's heart was noble and kind. Under his rule, Seriphos flourished, free of cruelty and fear. For a time, Perseus and Danae lived in peace, yet even peace cannot still the pull of destiny. One night, as they sat by the sea, Danae spoke softly. "You have grown, my son, but Argos still waits. Your grandfather lives, and though he wronged us, he is of our blood. You should return to him, if only to lay the past to rest." Perseus was silent for a long time, watching the waves roll in. "Perhaps," he said at last, "it is time." He journeyed to Argos with Danae, bearing no weapons but the sword of Hermes and the memories of his trials. Yet fate, the oldest of powers, walks paths unseen. When Acrisius heard that Perseus approached, he fled the city, for terror still ruled his heart. He wandered to Larissa in Thessaly, where games were being held in honour of the dead. Perseus, arriving soon after, entered the contest in sport, to honour the customs of men rather than gods. When his turn came in the discus throw, he cast it with the strength of one who had slain monsters. The discus soared high, glinting in the sunlight, and then struck a man among the onlookers. The crowd fell silent. When Perseus ran to the fallen man and turned him over, his breath caught in his throat. It was Acrisius. The prophecy had come to pass, not by hatred, not by revenge, but by accident, as if fate itself had waited patiently for this moment. Perseus knelt beside his grandfather's body, his hands shaking. "It was not meant to be," he murmured. But in his heart, he knew. No man can escape the will of the gods. He buried Acrisius with honour, weeping not for the king who had wronged him, but for the man who had tried in vain to flee what was written in the stars. Years passed. Perseus returned to Argos, not as a prince but as a hero who ruled with wisdom and restraint, never forgetting the cost of power or the fickleness of destiny. With Andromeda at his side, he raised a family whose line would echo through ages. Their descendants would one day include Heracles, the mightiest of all heroes, but Perseus himself never sought worship. When his time came, Zeus lifted him to the heavens, setting his image among the constellations. Sword raised high, the Gorgon's head in hand, eternal among the stars. And so his story endured. The boy born of prophecy, cast into the sea, who rose to slay monsters and challenge fate itself. The name of Perseus became a light for all who stood against darkness, proof that even when the gods decree a man's doom, courage can make him divine.